Greetings. Thank you for joining us today for a conversation with Ed Bereal, activist artist. I am Bruce Guenther, art historian and adjunct curator of special exhibitions for the Oregon Jewish Museum and Center for Holocaust Education. Previously, I've been the curator and head of the contemporary art program at the Seattle Art Museum, the chief curator at the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, and chief curator here at the Portland Art Museum until I retired in 2014. I first met Ed Bereal through friends, mutual friends actually, Ed and Nancy Kienholz, who said, "We have a really good artist we want you to know. And it's Ed Bereal. He's up from where you're from and lives in Bellingham, Washington. You need to get to know him." And so on their recommendation, I started looking around and finding a work here, a reference there, a show that I was able to see. And then today, we're here to talk about a survey of drawings at the Elizabeth Leach Gallery that covers Ed Bereal's production, his thinking out loud through drawings from 1958 to 2020. And so with that context, I'd like to introduce Ed Bereal. Ed Bereal was educated and came to national notice in the early 1960s as part of the West Coast assemblage movement, which included artists like Ed Kienholz and John Otterbridge, Betty Saar. He started exhibiting early in his career, just out of school, and would go on to be internationally celebrated in museums and gallery exhibitions in Europe and America. He has a distinguished roster of galleries on his resume that included the Ferris Gallery and Dwan Gallery, early modernist outpost in Los Angeles, as well as Leo Castelli and Jack Tilton in New York. In the Northwest, he's been represented by the Elizabeth Leach Gallery since 1998. His work has opened doors and minds for over 50 years, and most recently was a standout in the Getty Museum's Pacific Standard Time that surveyed post-war California art, and in a retrospective at the Whatcom County Museum in Bellingham of Ed's work over a 50-year period. It is a pleasure today to have Ed join me to discuss drawing as the source and this inspiration for his work. Welcome, Ed.
Well, you do one hell of an introduction. I didn't even recognize that person that you were introducing. I mean, whoa, man, I got to carry you around in my pocket.
You know, it's very exciting to be able to talk about this exhibition at the Elizabeth Leach Gallery, Ed Bereal's Studio Series. It's a survey of drawings from 1958, I think, during your student years through 2020. Because you've always said drawing is the heart and the beginning of your work.
Yeah, it's true. You've probably heard the term visual language. Well, it's the way that I talk to myself. I think out ideas and having my hand moving while I'm trying to work something out is what we're really talking about as far as drawing goes.
Well, and I think that's beautifully evident to the observer when they encounter your drawings. The attack of the hand through the instrument of charcoal or pencil or oil pastel as you touch the page and the line erupts and explores and descends and defines. It's something I think you probably came to. Were you a child who drew?
Yeah, it was often said by my parents and others that when I dropped out of my mother, I crawled over to a pencil.
You went to Chouinard Art Institute at a really important moment in that school's evolution, I think.
It was a magical period of time. And believe it or not, I was desperately trying to get into Art Center, and because they had various opinions about people of color at that time. Um, I don't know whether you know the story or not, but I took some time out to put together a portfolio together with two friends. We were living in Riverside, California at the time. And we were all three wanted to go to Art Center because that's the only art school we knew anything about.
It was the
And
school that fed Disney. It was the school that was making the biggest impact at the time in the
yes,
late 50s, early 60s.
correct. And so we put our portfolios together and we laid them out so each other could see each other's work. Unfortunately, I felt like my two friends' portfolios didn't look quite as good as they could. So I gave them several drawings of my drawings to put in their portfolio to help pick them up a little bit. And yeah, we all three submitted to Art Center, and they both got it accepted, and I didn't. And I could not understand. I mean, it hit me to the core because I thought I knew what quality looked like. I thought I knew what my abilities were. And yet they rejected me until I realized you had to send a photograph with your portfolio.
Oh, yes.
And my two friends were white.
Yes.
And it turned out to be the most wonderful decision that I had no control over that was ever made almost in my life, because I was forced to go to Chouinard as a consolation prize. And it turned out to be the most important school, certainly on the West Coast at the time, and maybe in the country. It was hot.
It was
And
very hot. And Bob Irwin was there when you were in school. And he made a revelation, and he commented on one time in a lecture I had him do at Washington State University about how great art, in his opinion, he discovered at the time you were in school, came from inside the artist. It wasn't formal skill, but it was content that was driven by the artists themselves.
absolutely. Bob was like, I mean, you have to realize that I came out of Riverside, California, and we knew more about orange groves, smudge pots, and and poorly built hot rods than than we knew about any kind of art, or what a real artist was about. So I mean, I guess our contact with the arts was Norman Rockwell. That was it.
And which is why many artists of your generation went to art school to become illustrators, to become the Norman Rockwells
Yeah,
and the Lydecker of the future.
yeah.
Plus,
Well,
with
you're
Disney, there was great employment available in
yes.
that post-war period.
Disney had just bought Chouinard
Ah, yes.
as we were entering. But the point I was trying to make was that uh, I was kind of a country boy. Joe and Ed Ruscha and Pat Blackwell and those guys uh, came from Oklahoma, and they were really kind of country boys. They didn't know anything but uh, Spurs, cowboy boots, and Roy Rogers movies, right? So they and I think Lynn, a little older than we were, kind of had the same kind of background, more of an urban background, but we just didn't know anything about art. So that walking into a Bob Irwin classroom was like going from Earth to Mars. I mean,
Oh, I'm
this guy,
sure.
he was making, for me at least, he was making so much sense about things I had never even thought about, that really really turned my life. It wasn't just my art and what I thought was my art, but it just turned my life around.
I think there's something very beautiful in the exhibition of drawings in these early portraits of yours, which show, it's, as I think you said at one point, you were sitting in the studio and you were always drawing, but you just propped up a mirror and you started looking at yourself. But like any self-portrait, they opened in another way. Have you done them continuously, or was this a period in those student and just after days when you're trying to see?
Yeah, well, it was also my hand up until Chouinard and Bob, and we need to also mention Emerson Wolfer, uh, Richards Rubens. All those guys were really coming from another place, but my hand was moving until I got into Chouinard, but I hadn't been introduced to my hand until Chouinard. And so part of the self-portrait situation was I didn't have a model. I didn't want to do still lifes or whatever. So a mirror and me as model were the handiest. But what was happening was getting in touch with my hand and getting in touch with mark making. There's a magic when a particular medium touches a surface and starts making a mark. It's still a magical thing for me,
Well, and that exploration and discovery is so present in your self-portraits of this period. You can feel the exploration. Sometimes there's agitation, the way the line gets forced into the paper, and you push and you push and you push, and it's staccato.
Yeah.
And then the line will break out, and it traces this arc that's like the breath of air, just sort of opening up and holding. And then it comes back to the head, and the head is this kind of beautiful sense of modeling, because you're also clearly had a great hand for using tone and smudging and kind of pressing the charcoal into the kind of three-dimensionality that has the head emerging from an activated field of this line, and the description you have about finding your hand, then discovering yourself and recording yourself. They're poetic, those drawings.
Well, I think part of that struggle also with me getting to know myself and my hand was an issue that Bob brought to me, which was incredibly important and is central to a lot of what I'm doing now, and that is illusionary space. I could not, and Bob brought seeing to all of us, and his statement about seeing. Seeing is forgetting the name of the thing being seen.
Ah, yes, the notion that you become so much of the thing that you lose its definition and discover it new.
What happens is you say table. Well, immediately all kind of preconceived ideas and pictures jump in your head, and it's a surface with four legs sticking down, and you assume you have looked at the table, and you haven't. You haven't looked at that table today in that light and been able to take that or take whatever tool you have in your head and translate that table onto a flat surface. In other words, you have now become aware, number one, and have found out how to translate or how to deny follow me, how to deny physics so that you now have a three-dimensional appearing table on a two-dimensional surface.
Well, that is ultimately that beauty of each of the portraits as we see them in the exhibition, and as I've seen them over the years in catalogs, is each time you come to your face on the sheet, it's another sliver of who Ed Bereal was as a 20-year-old, as a 18-year-old. Each time it's another voice that comes from your face, another presence.
Well, the face is a constant. And I accepted that as a constant, but using that as a constant or a tool to examine spatial references, to examine the tactile, the touch of a pencil or a brush on a surface. That whole, and really studying the kind of space that you must be aware of to let's say in full face, to get a chin to come forward and have a neck stay behind it.
Yes. You know, it's interesting to hear to hear the two positions that our voices are taking. I speak as the observer, and you speak as both the creator and the subject.
Yeah.
And, you know, to hear what you've just said is to understand the problem and the resolution. And in that resolution, I, the viewer, discover and experience, I think, some part of the psychological or emotional reality of the subject as given to me through the mark and the resolution of the rendering that is both a verisimilitude of your face as a young man, but then the energy of the spirit that is the line, the mass, the definition. There's a wonderful drawing in which you take quickly 3 lines and you create almost like a window frame or around the bottom, the sides and the bottom, and then the head just comes against it. And you feel like suddenly, of course, it could be the edge of the mirror, it could be a window, it could be something, but what it does is it pulls you into the present, into that moment, framed, isolated, engaging us as a viewer.
I need to thank you. I'm enjoying your descriptions of what I do. And I want to thank you for looking at those drawings that closely. Because, again, seeing was very much the issue when I was working on those pieces. And obviously, I think might have been George Bernard Shaw that said, all a good writer needs is a good reader. Well, all a good artist needs is a good observer. And thank you.
Whose idea was this poster?
It was kind of a collective idea. We were looking at each other, and we liked each other. We're all very close friends, and we're going, okay, what kind of show can we have? You know, and Joe likes to claim it was his idea, but it was more of a collective. It was a collective idea, and we looked at each other and went, "Hey, let's take advantage of this." You know.
Yes.
And we were thinking about stereotypes of each one of our groups, and that's why we were eating what we were eating, sitting around the table. And at one point, and it might have been Larry, I'm not sure, but somebody came up with, how about we were all born around the same time, just before the Second World War, and we were babies during that time. Whoa, let's call ourselves war babies. And
Absolutely.
we all went, whoa, that's a great title. Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
So Jerry McMillan, our cameraman, who came to Chouinard with Joe and Ed, he took the picture, and once we had the idea, the American flag was obvious.
Yes.
Ron's bowl of rice was obvious. Larry's bagel was obvious, and we stuck Joe with a piece of fish or some canned fish.
Canned herring, which is perfect.
Yes,
The expedient Friday night Catholic meal.
Exactly. Incredible taste as far as food goes. And then I, of course, had the watermelon.
It's wonderful because it combines the secondary meaning of war babies. You know, America was entering a period in which, you know, we were struggling again as a public with a generational break from the traditional values, redefining who the self is, as the first civil rights demonstrations were happening. America came to see itself as at war with itself, as well as the emerging Vietnam War that would come on us, having just finished Korea. As a document for the first integrated exhibition of Young Turks from Chouinard, you were all still in school, I think.
Yeah, we were.
So did you show the assemblage pieces, those kind of satchel and pipe and nail pieces?
That's when they first started, and I think when we had the show, I had maybe made 3 of those.
Yeah.
And the one that was kind of the star of my part of the show was it was called Summer Mechanic, because what I did during the summer vacation from Chouinard was I was a mechanic in Riverside and saved my money so that it made the next semester of school a little easier for me.
Oh, yes.
And that's when I discovered the fact. And again, for me, Bob, I was really at the core of a lot of what I was thinking about and how I was evolving, because we had talked about, and I think all of us and all of the war babies were affected by the fact that at this particular time that we were in Chouinard, the country was going through the awareness and the advent of abstract expressionism. And the country wasn't doing a great job of digesting abstract expressionism at the time. So
no, that's right.
Chouinard was in the middle of a battle. And Bob and Rubens and Wolfer, a couple of others, were on one side. And then we had Moore, I forget his name. He was kind of the head of the design department, represented the old guard, and they were, I mean, we were having battles inside inside the school, which really made our education that much better. Thinking back thinking back on that period of time, all of us, all the war babies, were being raised as abstract expressionists.
Yes.
Because that's who Rubens, Wolfer, and Irvine were trying to be. And therefore, for me at least, I was wrestling with something that Irvine had presented to me, which was up until abstract expressionism, artists were painting pictures of things.
Yes.
In other words, they had an outside reference. With abstract expressionism, we had the luxury of being able to paint not pictures, but paintings that were things.
Yes. Yes.
So so that in Summer Mechanic, I was able to think in terms of not a picture of something, but something that existed uh, as as an entity in itself, so that nails and uh, nuts and bolts and things like that were perfectly appropriate to use as elements in this piece, because I was not trying to be something other than what and wasn't trying to make something other than what was in front of me and what it was, not a representation of something else. You know, one of the things that I was aware of at one point was that there's a simultaneity that happens with most artists, aware of it or not. But I was aware of the fact that I was, well, this verbiage just jumped into mind. I was worshiping at several idols. Uh, uh, Number one, I am basically at my core an abstract expressionist, and the love of the mark and the slash and the raw quality that abstract expressionism has was always attractive to me. I love the Franz Kleins. I love the Mark Rothkos. And at the same time, I'm in love with John Singer Sargent, who, if you look at the brushwork work and some of those dresses and so forth, he's an abstract expressionist, really. He just puts a head on it that is quite well represented. But he absolutely adores what his brush is doing. And it's not really pretending to be something else. Well, there's that part of my influence. And at the same time, I come from a family of musicians. And music and sound has always been visual for me, so that I hear symphonic works, the blues and jazz, in terms of color and volume and space. You get a certain kind of audio space that happens in there that I'm absolutely fascinated by. But I bring this up because the blues has a very raw, kind of semi-finished feel to it when a guy without an education speaks the language and he makes it work for what he's about, which is singing the blues. I love that, and therefore I love the rawness that can happen in a piece of art. I really like Cy Twombly, and
Yes.
that whole dance he has between what some might call chaos and um, uh, well, chaos and um, uh,
Well,
maybe
perhaps a compositional structure. Yeah. Twombly's line never loses, in all of its anxiety and expression and excitement, he never lets go of the idea of the compositional whole.
no,
Sometimes he retains it. And that is at the core what that dance between hand and heart, mind and paper is about.
right. But for the uneducated eye, he's like absolutely chaotic. He's over the edge, and I really like him because of how close he comes to the edge, and how seemingly accidental some of those pieces are, only they're not accidental at all.
It's nice to know that you enjoy that work, because there is, in the early drawings, it's very self-evident that you're sharing that aesthetic position. In the latest work and in the Miss America Presents work, that line still sneaks out, even though you've harnessed so much of it to give the power of the image. But there's in the way the individual marks build up that has that, still has that AE, abstract expressionist energy.
Well, there's that tension between having to be representational because of trying to speak to political issues.
Yes.
And the other side of that being enjoying what abstract expressionism gave me, the freedom to make the mark, and
Yes.
being able to kind of balance those two is a little tricky, but it's also absolutely enjoyable to be able to represent a figure and then have it trail off into the mark for its own
Yeah.
sake. I love that, you know.
Yeah. And it's the pleasure of the experience of your drawings for a viewer to find, to confront the image and then find your eye dancing
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and coming away and coming back into a very complex illusionary space that is both tangible and abstract, that layers up in a way that takes you mentally and visually someplace and pulls you back, forces you into confront, and then seduces you to stay. And it's the line and that quality of the line, I think. And it's evident in this exhibition.
well, I still feel like well, I'm always going to be a student of drawing, a student of mark making, a student of let's say painting or assemblage. It's always teaching me. And right now I'm looking at a new body of work because my wife has been just torturing me with the need for me to start drawing again for its own sake, not as preliminary for something else, but she loves my drawing and she says, you got to draw, you got to draw. Well, what about drawing? And I go, well, and so forth. I'm thinking about some new materials. And she goes, well, great. What about drawing? So I'm going to, looks like the new work is going to be coming together of new materials, illusionary space, actual space, holography, and drawing. That's going to be a tricky one to knit together, but I'm really excited about the challenge.
Well, it seems like a very logical and kind of exciting next step, given the way the installations and the paintings have been in the last decade. It's very, very logical way to sort of explore that. And I love the idea of actively taking the dimensional, the space in front of and behind the drawing in a hologram and activating it. I want to get you to tell the story about 1965-66. It is like Chouinard is one of the foundation stones in understanding you and your work. I think the Watts Rebellion, or as it was called in the mainstream white press, the riot, the first major stepping up and out of the Black community since Reconstruction. What talk about that? It changed your trajectory and your fame quotient in an interesting
Yeah,
way.
yeah, it was. That's a very that period, and that there was an occurrence that happened during that time that was as powerful a instance as me getting refused entrance into Art Center. In this case, I had been introduced in 1950 I guess it was 58 when I first went to Chouinard, I got introduced to a whole nother world. And I must confess, I really love Bob Irwin as a human being. And we have some kind of kinship that was very powerful in my life. And he has secretly done a lot of stuff to supplement my career when at times when I wouldn't do it. You know, I
Yes.
think he was behind, I'm pretty sure he was behind the Murphy show, actually, and I might have financed that. I don't know. But I'm saying all this to say that I had entered the world of the arts, and Bob was kind of the door. So I was working in my studio in Los Angeles, probably 10 hours a day. And then at the end of my work day, I'd go to Barney's and sit around with all the guys and drink and hit on the girls and talk a little bit about art, get probably a little bit toasted and come home. And that's all I ever did for years, I guess. And certainly prior to August of 1965. I was on my way home from Barney's one night, and I could smell a lot of smoke. And as I got closer to my house, there were police cars going up and down the streets with their sirens going, people running all over the place, and this heavy smell of smoke. I got to my place and didn't have any idea what was going on. I went inside and went to bed, went to sleep. Got up the next day and was informed that the Watts riots had just started.
Yeah.
I don't know that it was that morning, but it was a subsequent morning when I came out, which was my habit to, I got up because I was up so late most of the time. I would get up at 10, 10:30, 11, walk out the door, take a stretch, look at things, come back in and get to work. Well, this one morning I came out and there was a Jeep parked in front of my studio across the perpendicular to the road, and it had a submachine gun on it, and it had a National Guardsman behind that. And when I opened the door, it jarred both of us. Only he was the one with the gun.
Oh, yeah.
And so I had this magical moment when I went, I'm doing really good in the art world. They're writing a couple of articles about me. Walter Hopps thinks I'm really cool. Irving likes the work, a little bit different kind of guy. But if I put all that stuff in front of me, put the whole art scene in front of me, between me and the muzzle of that gun, that would never stop the bullet. So in my mind, I'm going, maybe I'm invested in the wrong place. I'm not, I need to pick up a whole lot of things that I have kind of forgotten, put in the rearview mirror, and realized that I need to be aware of the world just outside my door and not someplace across town in North Hollywood or in Hollywood, someplace on La Cienega.
Yeah.
So at one point, I was in the Tilton Gallery at the time. They were paying me to stay home and work. And very shortly after that incident, I left the gallery, kind of left the art scene, went home back to Riverside to try to pick up kind of where I left off some roots. And I started doing a lot of writing and trying to work out where I was, what was going on. And just like when I came to Chouinard, Bob introduced me to another world. I had to let that world go a little bit, or at least put it in context, and context with the world that I had left, only I had not fully examined. Do you understand what
Yes.
I'm saying?
No,
So,
I do. There, this is the kind of fracture, that experience, where you have to reconnect with the roots and the reality of the experience of the Black community and your own privilege within it,
yes. And
and
I did,
recast your energy
yeah.
and your activity.
I was given, and at its root, certainly, Watts was about race and inequity and so forth. On the other hand, and I have to say this, the art world was for the most part very supportive of what I was doing and what I was thinking about, and I really was. I mean, I was working at Ferris Gallery as kind of helping to prepare the space and doing work around there in anticipation of some of the shows that were going to be mounted. I helped put up the first Warhol show on the West Coast. I was getting support from Walter and certainly Henry and even Irving.
Yeah, Irving Blum, who
Yeah, yeah. They were all like really. I was kind of pretty much in the major kind of in the
no,
major
it wasn't
league.
kind of,
Yeah,
Ed, you
I was in,
were part of the boys club
yeah, I
that
was
was defining what LA art was going to be about.
right.
From the
And
assemblage group with Keenholz and Otterman,
Outerbridge.
Otterbridge, and all of those guys who were making art, Ed,
But
Boucher, Joe Good.
what happened was that I was also watching L.A. burn.
Yes.
I went to Lynn Keenholz's house, which is in the Hollywood Hills during that time, and I looked at LA and there were fires going up all over the place. And I went, oh shit, this is a biggie. And at the same time, when I go back to my studio, I'm kind of in the middle of it, but it's a little south of me. What's so stark was that world that was so acceptant of me could not acknowledge this huge thing that was going on all around it, and actually I watched people pretend that it wasn't going on. It's like Trump pretending there is no virus.
Right. It's the same kind of privileged detachment and delusional.
Yes. And I couldn't buy that.
Yeah.
I could not buy that. So my decision was pretty obvious. I had to go with, and believe me, I was thinking about the art world as art hanging on white walls in these very exclusive spaces when, and talking about the excitement of a painting on a wall when I really had excitement going on in the streets with a whole nother body of information as education. And I had to go there. I had to be a part of that and open my life to that.
So
And
it becomes a radical reorganization and
yeah,
reordering of your work and your imagery, and also place. Because
yes,
this is a period in your bio in which you quit making exhibitions in the mainstream where you had been welcomed, but were a token figure
yes,
in many regards,
yes.
because you were having success in a way that Betty Saar wasn't getting seen at the
Well,
time.
Betty was quite a bit later.
Yes.
She was
And so, what happens is, I think then there's the great bodacious Buggerilla.
Gorilla.
Bugarilla.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's that whole moment from the late 60s into the almost a decade,
yeah.
you gave form to, you were creating imagery that I find, and situational presentations that were both street performance, in galleries, church steps, comedy, nightclubs with Richard Pryor. Your group became this voice of street theater, not unlike the San Francisco Mime Troupe or
Right.
the Living Theater had been in New York, where the issues, the ideas, and the lives of Black people were put in a context
Right.
that appropriated popular culture.
One of the things you probably know this, one of the things I was doing was trying to knit together my experience in the art world and my experience on the streets. And I was doing a lot of writing, and it turned into an attempt to write a play about the uh, uh, the um, the structure that I witnessed and called the United States of America. I wanted to do a metaphor for that class structure, for the ghetto versus Main Street. And I was writing like crazy. And also, I was teaching at Irvine, UC Irvine, and University Cal Riverside. And I was dealing with Black students in Riverside, and we ended up starting to play with skits about our experiences. And make a long story short, the play I was trying to write and the skits the kids were trying to come up with kind of came together in this beautiful thing we ended up calling the Bodacious Bugarilla. And we ended up trying to do street theater on the streets or wherever. And it became incredibly popular. And it became, for me, a place that I had to give up in the art scene, but was able to relive in many ways through Bodacious.
Yes. Yeah, I see some of the things coming out of that form part of the way you montage or bricolage it, but it's not three-dimensional in the imagery of the drawings of the present. The way that this kind of tension between American idealism and Black reality, social dynamics in the city versus, the emotional life of the individual. And it's a very powerful image base to come to.
Well, I think Bodacious did some pretty phenomenal things creatively, in the sense that there were people who had no relationship to any of the arts other than to listen to music. And they came together and made this incredible focus of energy. And they were able to put together metaphors for the lives that they lived every day. And those metaphors were in the form of some kind of a performance that that touched audiences very, very deeply. For a long time, we were committed to only work in the ghetto in front of Black audiences, but the word got out, and we ended up with a couple of performances at USC, and then UCLA, and then Lompoc Prison, and then at a place called the Ash Grove in Hollywood. and the Ash Grove was a place where kind of left-wing radicals in the music business or in anything could kind of apply their arts in front of an audience. And we now were kind of on Main Street and being recognized, but also being recognized by the FBI.
Yes, who
And
got interested because,
yeah,
well, you make a powerful critique of corporate greed and American complicity and racism, and the FBI that period would be interested in you.
yeah, they were, and they were really interested in whether we were part of a network of people, which included the Black Panther Party, who we were pretty close to.
Yeah.
But they were really kind of very interested in Bodacious. I would like to think because we were great artists, but I don't think that was it.
Yeah, the FBI is not known for their connection with the
No,
arts,
with the arts.
but
No.
it is, as you've often said, what you say and how you say it
Right.
is the important thing.
Right.
And
right.
and so Bodacious then was that what took you into video and into film for a while?
Yeah, we were on the streets until the FBI came, and then people's scholarships. There were several of the members of the group were still in college, and their scholarships started drying up, and people were getting agents visiting them on their jobs, and it started being pretty difficult to stay on the streets. So with the help of the National Endowment for the Arts, we got some money, and then we put together a 3-color camera video studio, and which was called Bodacious TV Works. And that's when our desire was to put together a mobile unit with a screen in it, and we could still do what we were doing on the streets, only it would be a video taped, and we could do it that way. What happened was that I and a couple of members got sucked up into photojournalism, which took me to the Middle East, North Africa, to the IRA prisons in Ireland, to Siberia. And I'm kind of elaborating on this mostly because traveling around the world with a camera on my shoulder and examining, really basically as examining centers of hatred around the world was incredibly educational for me.
Yeah. Well, it would be, and as a Black man traveling then with a camera, you don't become less suspect.
No.
But it also opens doors in places like Cuba or other places. Well, it's very interesting. This had to have fed the Miss America Presents series in a very interesting way. And that is what ends the show at the Leach Gallery and presents some of the most timely and complexly emotionally draining work we'll have seen there in many years.
Yeah. Well, I think seeing, I have experienced a kind of hatred in the United States, but tell you frankly, it didn't compare to what I saw in Kosovo. A kind of hatred that goes back 2,000 years, and it has had an opportunity to become very sophisticated in how it expresses itself. Nothing like here. I mean, in this country, you know, somebody calls you a name, they wait until night, get a couple of friends, they go out and string you up. Well, they went through that 1,500 years ago in Kosovo.
Right, that's
You
true.
know,
Yeah.
now they really do it, right?
Yeah.
Well, I had when I came back to the U.S., I again was confronted with Norman Rockwell, and I've discovered at that time, was probably one of the most political artists that I knew. His stuff was incredibly political in the sense that he was giving me these cute, really apple pie, pink cheeked images of Miss America on the sunny side of the street. Well, I was raised on the shady side of the street, and it piqued my interest to know, well, what does Miss America look like on my side of the street? What does Miss America look like in North Vietnam at that time? What does Miss America look like in North Africa? And so I came up with this image, which seemed to answer my question. She looks probably a little bit like this. I mean, she's got mechanical hands kind of symbolizing our love of technology. At the same time, there's bones there. There's this head that is kind of a death's head, but with the nails sticking out of it, it also resembles the Statue of Liberty a little bit with the spires that come out. And I thought, what a great foil to use in starting to dig down in this situation and be able to talk about it somehow visually.
Yes, as both a theme and a Virgil, if you will.
Yes.
Taking us on a journey through hell.
Yes.
I think certainly
a mistress of ceremony.
Yes, yes, and the people she might date.
Yes.
Certainly, one of the centerpieces of the exhibition is going to be Miss America Presents Domestic Terrorism.
Yeah.
And certainly could not be more on the money for the situation we face today across the country and with the current administration. The drawing we're discussing, of course, features the Miss America character at the top. Right. And the flag, as it becomes a series of banners and then snake-like extensions of the stripes. And at the base is a New York cop.
Right.
Classic, empowered, rigid.
Written on that is Miss America presents New York's finest, loyal, courageous, something else, and racist as shit. And then it says urban terrorist, which I think is the verbiage that made a flag go up when that went out online.
It may well be. And it's a drawing that has collaged newspaper at the base, around the feet of the policeman and across the bottom of the sheet.
Right.
And that has been submerged with a little pigment so that it steps back.
Yes.
But it's about one of the first murders.
Yes, Freddie Gray.
Freddie Gray.
Yeah.
It could not be more relevant this moment.
I know, it's getting more relevant daily.
But this is the way that, if it can, art exposes us, informs us, and hopefully will serve to change all of us.
Well, Bruce, I feel like, I've kind of tapped into a place that is a place that I can live in, but I'm not yet doing the job that maybe I might be capable of. I've got to dig deeper as far as what I'm talking about, and I've got to be much more magical how I talk about it. I'm thinking about, and I've always said, I'm talking to the young people. I'm talking to the truck driver who is not oriented necessarily to art. I want to speak a language that can attract that kind of mentality, as well as with a dialogue, with a conversation that makes that kind of mentality have to stop and go, whoa, wait a minute, where am I? What is going on? You know, what's what am I doing that I'm not conscious that I'm doing, you know? And somebody asked me about the retrospective, and I had to say, well, I'd give myself maybe a B- for the show. I think I could be much more, I could go deeper into subject matter, and I can be technically a lot more sophisticated. And that's what I'm looking to do with this new stuff.
Well, on that note, looking forward, we'll hope to do this again when you found that resolution. Thank you, Ed. This is a conversation around a survey of drawings from 1958 to 2020 by Ed Bereal at the Elizabeth Leach Gallery in Portland, Oregon.
Thank you, Bruce, for your insights and for being able to see a drawing. Which
Thank you for making those drawings. They add to the world in an important way.
I have divided the art world into two areas: those people who can see and those people who can't. And it doesn't make you a bad person if you can't see, but I think you got at least your eyes are kind of there. You're doing okay.
Well, thanks. This has been great.